Blockchance Online Live is an online live-streamed broadcast talk show about blockchain, AI, and green technology. We bring inspiring speakers and innovative thought leaders together to talk about current and future developments within these exciting new fields. Join us to learn how we can use these disruptive technologies to better aid humanity and strive for a fair, secure, humane, and positive future. Get involved in our community and share your opinions and ideas. Together, we can make a difference.
Greetings to all you good people out there and welcome to Blockchance Online Live. My name is Albert Pizzi and today we will discuss about the DeFi revolution on blockchain. What does DeFi actually mean? So many of you have heard this term maybe already in connection with Ethereum and other blockchains, decentralized finance. But before we talk about decentralized finance, let's have a quick look into the history of finance itself. If we start with the financial system as we know it today, we could argue that in the 1920s, we started to make financial markets more efficient through the introduction of accounting machines and punch cards. In the 1950s, we introduced mainframe computers to improve efficiency of the finance industry. This actually positioned banks as one of the tech innovators and leaders in finance. Many people don't know nowadays because nowadays we consider banks as something slow and old and outdated. And you can actually see most or many code snippets are still running in legacy systems and using legacy programming languages like COBOL, being from that time. In the 1970s, we get ATMs and credit cards, actually. So it's not such an old, but also not such a new innovation. And also during that same year, we start to use computers and algorithms to improve stock market trading. In the 90s, we have the full computerization of finance. So this completely amplifies the effect of computers applied to finance. We get online banking, we get stock market trading from computers online at home, we get wirecard transfers. And then in the early 2000s, we have what we could call the fintech revolution. So companies like Revolut, Robinhood, PayPal, and so on, they give users an easy access to financial services. And today, I'm very happy to actually talk about the next step, let's call it. And we have two wonderful guests here. Our first guest is Vanessa Grellet. She's the head of portfolio growth at CoinFund. It's an investing company for Web3 projects. And she's also very well known for her work at, for example, at ConsenSys. She, what I would say, is one of those OGs who are long enough in the space that they understand what is a hype and what is bringing real value to the ecosystem. Please say hello to the audience, Vanessa.
Hi, everyone. Excited to be here and to have our discussion today.
Right. Our second guest today is Tegan Kline. She's the co-founder and business lead at Edge&Node. Edge&Node is the organization behind the Graph protocol, which is an indexing and querying protocol. And she's also one of these people who are long enough in the space that they really know what they're talking about. And I'm really happy to have you here as well. Please say hello to the audience, Tegan.
Thank you so much. Yes, it's great to be here. Hi, everyone, and happy to kind of help distinguish some signal in all of the noise in this ecosystem.
Fantastic. And I would like to start the show with a very personal question to make it really practical for people who are not in the DeFi space, who are not in the blockchain space. Do you remember your first usage of DeFi, a DeFi product, a DeFi service? So what was it like, and why did you use it at all? What's the reason? Why should somebody use a DeFi protocol? How does this happen?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say Uniswap was my first kind of usage within DeFi. I guess you could also say maybe using like a Coinbase, but then kind of transferring that Ethereum to Uniswap to change it for different ERC20 tokens, for example, like Aave or different ERC20 tokens that are within that platform. And an ERC20 token is just kind of a token that's using Ethereum and the Ethereum standard. And so like DeFi, the movement really came during COVID. And we called it DeFi suffrage because there was so much innovation and so many different things happening within the DeFi space And I was at the Graph at the time. I think I had just closed a round for them of $5 million. And then the Graph was really kind of helping to enable that DeFi movement, because a lot of the developers within the DeFi protocol were using subgraphs and kind of building through the bear market that was very long for all of us. And then that all kind of came to fruition during DeFi summer.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I would say Uniswap was obviously one of the first platforms there, but stablecoins like MakerDAO, and then other platforms like Compound that also allow you to do lending, I think were exciting applications for me. The lending use case was actually one of the first use cases that I discussed when I joined early on ConsenSys, and we were looking at all the applications. And I think we'll have great future there.
So we already named a few vocabularies that might not be so familiar for many people. We are talking about these like everyday things like Uniswap and MakerDAO and stablecoins and so on. But for most users, this is utterly confusing. And it's not just because it's blockchain, this is like on top. It's also because many people, or like a lot of people at least, don't have this financial literacy, let's call it this way, to actually deal with these kind of things. And now suddenly we don't just ask them to understand blockchain, but become completely accountable and also controlling how they invest their money. So if there is someone who has never heard about DeFi, how would you describe it to that person?
Yeah, I think Bitcoin really revolutionized payments. It revolutionized money. And then Ethereum revolutionized finance, and it revolutionizes the internet. And within Ethereum, there's a lot of DeFi, which is decentralized finance, and it's removing kind of like this third party that's at the center of finance. So for example, that could be like your bank or a different government, and instead you can kind of transact peer to peer. And Bitcoin was the first time you could ever really do that. And when you see that kind of innovation for the first time, something that is truly like you cannot do this in the traditional space, then you need to pay attention, because there's likely going to be so much more innovation that follows. And DeFi is kind of like that innovation that has followed. It kind of started with flash loans early on. Like you can't do a flash loan in traditional finance. You can only do that within DeFi. And there's just so much innovation that's happening within this decentralized space because of the transparency that's there that you couldn't otherwise do. And I also argue that the financial crisis likely wouldn't have happened if it was within the blockchain space, because a lot of those mortgage-backed securities were there. They just couldn't identify quick enough where they were, who owned them. There was no transparency into that. And with the blockchain space, obviously there's a lot of transparency, and you can see and know who owns everything.
So, yeah.
So in terms of the DeFi, if you wanted to make it tangible for people, it's mechanisms that allow you to transact and conduct operations that as an individual you really couldn't really do before, because it was either only for institutions or really high net worth individuals. So for example, think about stock lending and borrowing. If you had something in your portfolio, it was not obvious that you could lend and use as a collateral the entirety of your portfolio. But here with DeFi, you can do it very quickly, seamlessly. You can borrow and lend. You can use stablecoins to transact in those operations. And you can become a liquidity provider, which is something that individuals could not do, and earn yield. So the capacity to earn yield at a percentage that is much higher than what you could get in your bank is really, I think, what speaks to a lot of people and individuals, and helps them go to the DeFi instead of going to their traditional institutions, which will only give you like a very small yield for your assets and savings.
Okay, if we talk about something like borrowing and lending in the blockchain world, let me try to play a naive non-crypto person. So I say, okay, I lend like 100 ETH or so, but what do I do with this?
So within lending, you're over collateralizing your loan. So right now, I think two of the problems within that lending space is one, the loan is variable, and then also that you have to over collateralize. And there are a number of companies that are kind of working on those two pieces. But you can, for example, let's say like, you know, a lot of us in the crypto space are now kind of unbanked. So it's difficult for certain people in crypto to be able to kind of get a mortgage like they traditionally would. So as someone who has a lot of crypto, I can over collateralize a loan. I could take a ton of Ethereum, a ton of Bitcoin, because I don't want to sell those assets, but I want to get fiat to be able to maybe buy a house, or I want to be able to get like USDC to purchase a house. So I would over collateralize, meaning I would put maybe like 2 or 3x the crypto that I have underneath that loan to collateralize it. And then I would be able to receive USDC to borrow that money to be able to purchase whatever I wanted to purchase with that.
It's really important that you know, this gives you access to you know, maintaining your crypto assets while also benefiting from the fiat equivalent that you can use sort of in real life if you wanted to buy a house or finance any other operations in your day-to-day.
Oh, it looks like you're muted.
Yes, sorry, my mouse died for some reason. I have to use my keyboard. Okay, so actually, this sounds like something that is useful. And if it's useful, why is there still no mass adoption of DeFi? So why aren't still people using it? So what are the actual obstacles preventing people from using this new financial system?
I think that the infrastructure is still kind of being built out and stabilized. For example, like the graph is decentralizing the indexing and query layer kind of on top of the blockchain. And that's really important to kind of decentralize the stack fully so that applications aren't reliant on centralized service providers like an AWS or a different kind of centralized cloud infrastructure or computing. And so all of this is kind of being built out, and I think will kind of come to fruition in the next few months, you know, a year or two, and then we'll kind of see a lot more mass adoption. But I think the two pieces that are really kind of a factor right now are kind of scaling, and that's kind of like the big open question is like, how does this scale? Does it happen on Ethereum with ETH 2.0? Does it happen on a layer 2 blockchain like an Optimism and Arbitrum? Does it happen on a side chain like Polygon? Does it happen? Where does it happen on another blockchain like a Solana? That's kind of the big open question right now that the space is answering. And then if some of DeFi moves to another solution like a layer 2, how do those DeFi applications speak to one another? We need a connect that's kind of in the middle that's helping with composability. So I think that's kind of like the big open question right now.
In terms of mass adoption, I think, you know, these are new services that have a different user experience at this stage. So think about Coinbase, right? It's fairly straightforward to open an account on Coinbase and then transact. It's a little bit less easy to go over some of the wallets and then go into the applications and then, you know, transfer crypto, and you have gas fees, et cetera, that Tegan was alluding to regarding, you know, the price. And so the entire user experience right now for people to get into DeFi is not stellar and is not user-friendly for people who are not financially savvy, I would say. And so that's a large hurdle into mass adoption. But what we see is that the Revolut, the Robinhood, and other, you know, existing platforms that people are a little bit more comfortable with, and that, for example, they already have their accounts with, is starting to offer maybe not exactly DeFi, but DeFi-like yields and returns. and leveraging some of those mechanisms. And so I think quickly you will see an expansion of this, as long as all these platforms clear the regulatory hurdles that they have to, and that they ensure that the consumer is protected.
But one thing to note, like an interesting statistic that Hayden posted the other day, is Uniswap is actually doing more volume than Coinbase on their Ethereum to USDC pair. So it's kind of impressive. It's like very impressive that a protocol can do that kind of volume. Like the Uniswap team is very small compared to the thousands of people that are at Coinbase. So it's kind of crazy to see that kind of volume can be done kind of via a protocol. And I think that's a trend that we're moving towards, where these protocols can be, small teams wide, but because of the internet, anyone, anywhere can participate in that protocol, and that community can grow to millions, if not billions of people wide.
That's actually interesting, because I mean, in my field, like I'm in the blockchain space, so I know a lot of people using these services, but as soon as I leave the blockchain space, then there is no one actually even knowing about these services, though we have these big numbers that you just mentioned. Even if you look, for example, at the TVL for Ethereum, it's bigger than the one for Visa, for example. And so the question for me is, or at least for people who are not in the space, who are these people that are using these services? So are there any studies on those people? So just to give a reference here, like 1% of all Ethereum addresses have actually used at least once a DeFi protocol. But who are the people behind this? Are there like individual traders? Are there more like institutions? So can you give us some insights here?
I think it's all of the above, especially with Uniswap. I think it's more individuals kind of participating in that space. But I think, everyone is kind of getting involved. And as Vanessa mentioned, with Revolut, with Robinhood, all kind of participating in the crypto space, that's opening that funnel so that more people can kind of get exposure more easily to the crypto space, and then learn about the values behind crypto, learn about, why is this revolutionary? Why could this potentially disrupt everything? Wow, I should start paying attention and get involved, and then kind of go to the Coinbases to get more deeply involved, go to the Uniswaps from there, and then hopefully going to kind of get their own ledger or Trezor to be able to kind of become their own bank and not have to rely on a third party when partaking in the crypto space.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the actors, are obviously people who came in early in some of the protocols, who are trading or staking some of the assets. But you have a lot of trading firms, right? You've seen, institutions coming into the space. And basically, in order for them to trade, they need to use stablecoins. They need to they can have sort of DeFi strategies. So a lot of institutionals and traders are really leveraging that. You can use it as an individual, but I would say like the vast majority are using it as a real business activity.
And if you talk about institutions, what are the current obstacles for them to use a product like DeFi? Because in terms of regulation, it's probably quite difficult to regulate a system that is worldwide and has no owner. And that's like a difficult concept for many institutions. But what kind of institutions are currently already using DeFi, and what are they doing to actually make this happen in the future?
My question is, who is not looking at DeFi? You have all the asset managers across the board who are looking to leverage this new asset class. And you have specialized funds and hedge funds who are allocating part of their assets into these alternative strategies. So think of like really the large asset management. You've seen JP Morgan, you've seen also the payments institutions like Visa and PayPal. Everyone is looking to see how they can leverage DeFi, right? And how they can offer it to their clients. The issue, one of the main issues that stands out is the custody of the assets. What is really different, with crypto is that it's hard to delegate the custody, and unless you really, the security around that is quite complex. So they're all wrapping their heads around that and how they can securely trade and manage those assets.
Yeah, and to double click on that, I think, crypto is no longer a lottery ticket. It's no longer like, oh, I'm just going to put a little bit of money into Bitcoin and see, hopefully this works out. It's working out. It's here to stay. Crypto is now an asset class. And capital allocators, be it that an individual for their family, someone working at, a hedge fund, a pension fund, anything across the curve, a CEO now, like you have a responsibility as a capital allocator to allocate capital to crypto. And you need to be looking at the different buckets, like DeFi is one, NFTs are another, infrastructure is another, like Chainlink, like the graph. Protocols will likely be worth trillions of dollars in the future. Like we're coming after the ad market, the data market, the finance market. Everything across the curve is going to be disrupted by this technology, and capital allocators now have a responsibility to take that seriously for the future of their companies, for the future of their families.
It sounds like there is no other way around DeFi, and I like this. But what are the actual, what's the biggest danger for the DeFi space? Is there anything that could happen that could at least slow down the adoption of DeFi, or is it like something that, it's too late to actually stop for anyone?
I think that, sorry, go ahead, Vanessa.
I really feel it's unstoppable at this stage, and there are some concerns on the regulatory side, and international regulators are looking at ensuring that AML and other regulations are enforced, and it's going to be mainstream, then should comply with some regulations. Although there are concerns there, I don't think it's going to slow down anything. I think we're really gearing up towards mass adoption, and we want to make sure that we offer services that are safe, that comply with regulations, and so that more and more people can use it.
Yeah, I echo a lot of what Vanessa said. I do believe that it is unstoppable, but kind of taking a step back and zooming out, I think there's a danger around it potentially not going mainstream and maybe only crypto people use it. But for me, I kind of see it eating all of the centralized finance world and all of the internet and beyond. And also, there's risks around front running, there's risks around DeFi being more expensive than centralized finance, but I think all of these will be smoothed out in the future. And where the risk is, that's really where the alpha is. And so, higher risk, higher return, and early days are always going to be more risky than in the future. One example I like to use is creating a website. Now we take it for granted how easy that is. Anyone can do it. Like anyone, my parents, my grandparents can go and spin up a website by just a couple clicks. But in the past, creating a website was really complicated. There were teams that you had to hire to figure out which pieces of the stack to use, what was the best, which of these competing pieces of the stack were the best to use within that website creation. And that's kind of where we are within the crypto space, is there's a lot of different pieces of the stack. You have to kind of distinguish which one's better. But in the future, and this is one thing Edge&Node is really committed to, is helping people identify which pieces of the stack are the best to use and which will become the standard. And that's really where a lot of people are taking bets right now on which pieces of the stack will become the standard. I think it's very clear that the graph is the standard at the decentralized indexing and query layer, but there are other platforms like EPNS, which is decentralizing notifications. There's decentralizing location. There's decentralizing like music, like what LivePeer is doing, Audit is doing. And so there's so much that's kind of being created now, and the bets are on which you think will be the winners.
a bright new world. It sounds like something that nobody should miss and learn about. And we will talk about also a few drawbacks or dangers that are introduced when using a decentralized finance product or service. And also, further discuss how the graph, for example, enriches this ecosystem and even enables it. And we will do this right after a short break. And we see us in 30 seconds.
Who owns your data? Who owns your money? Your future. We are approaching a new dawn. Blockchain technology. Artificial intelligence. Sustainability. Be a part of the evolution. Hamburg, Germany, 2021. Blockchains, 2021.
Welcome back. We just talked about this bright new future and that is ahead of us and that seems unstoppable, and all the opportunities that DeFi gives to us and how easy accessible this is, open in a decentralized manner that actually everybody has also the chance to participate. And hearing all of this, we all just had a comment here in the chat that says, I'm getting chills just listening right now, because it seems like it's the first time that they heard about this. What are the dangers if you use DeFi? Because it's nothing like that you just use and everything goes all right. But what should you pay attention to? Should you educate yourself first about blockchain or finance, or do you need both? Or are there any like guided services that you can use? So what would you give or say someone who wants to get involved into DeFi and use these services?
Yeah, I think there are dangers. I think it's, as a user, your responsibility to make sure you understand what you're participating in. Also, kind of understanding the tech stack. For example, is the underlying blockchain Ethereum? If so, that's a good sign. If it's a centralized blockchain, that means that there could be potential dangers around using that blockchain. So you want the infrastructure to be decentralized. Also, are the APIs open or are they closed? For example, some people were investing in different NFTs with closed APIs. So what does that mean? That means that you're buying a art piece that is going to be there forever. But if those APIs are closed, if the infrastructure is centralized, that art piece may disappear that you just spent maybe $1 million on, may disappear in the future if that company were to go down. So you want to make sure they're using open APIs, which are called subgraphs in the crypto space. Also understanding like who's the team behind it, what's the team that created this protocol? Is it audited? I think Uniswap does a great job because they take their time to release different products and they really test, they really audit, and they really put their reputation behind what they're building. And they take security very seriously because there is a lot of money and volume flowing through the Uniswap exchange. So you want to make sure those pieces are kind of done. And also, if it's too good to be true, it likely is. So just be careful. If you're seeing like 2,000% yield, well, there's probably a ton of risk that's associated with that yield. And there's a term in the crypto space, it's called rug pulling. And it's when you kind of get the rug pulled out from under you and you lose your money. So you want to, buyer beware. You want to take responsibility for your own actions and really educate yourself before putting your capital out there.
What I want to double down on that. You want to be very careful with the platforms that you use. You want to look at the platforms that, if you're not financially savvy, or that's not your background, or have less understanding of crypto, look at the mainstream DeFi projects that have been around, that have been battle tested. If someone offers you to, go trade on this new platform, probably you want to, take a second look at that. And, there is the risk that some of the platforms get attacked. We've seen that in some instances. So always, maybe put the money that you can afford to lose. Also, if you want to test it out, and make sure that you're not putting too much of your capital at risk at the beginning, until you get comfortable with all these different mechanisms, whether it's staking or lending or borrowing, and also be there for the long term. Don't, if you're trying to make a quick buck, it's just going to be harder for you if you don't know how everything works. So just be careful. There are also some more centralized solutions like the Coinbase or Gemini or other more user-friendly platforms that will offer you less yield than the pure DeFi and decentralized things. But that's also a good way for you to get comfortable with, what these platforms are doing.
Yeah, and to kind of double click on that too. So with great power comes great responsibility. In crypto, we're trying to kind of remove this middleman and be our own bank. And there's a misconception because people hear the horror stories of like someone losing their laptop and then they lost their millions of dollars within Bitcoin. And like that could happen to them if they invest in like on a Robinhood or a Coinbase. And that's not the case, right? Because it is a centralized platform, just like a bank is centralized in holding your money. That's similar to like the Coinbase and similar to Robinhood. Where that can happen is when you transfer that to like a ledger or a Trezor and you have the private keys to those places where you're holding your crypto. That's when you have that responsibility to make sure that you maintain those keys and you have that in a safe space so that you can always access that crypto via the ledger, via the Trezor, which then is like your own bank. And so I think that's an important one to kind of double click on because I feel like a lot of people are afraid to get into crypto for that reason because they've heard that story. And it's just kind of like a common misconception.
And one thing that, go ahead, sorry.
I wanted to add, which is pretty exciting, is that all the information is out there. There is so much information about all these platforms, what they offer, guides to DeFi. If you go on Medium, there's so much, materials there. So if you take the time to educate yourself, you'll see why we are so excited about DeFi, and you may want to dive into it.
One thing that I want to stress also a little is we have the responsibility of the user, of course, to keep their private keys private and secure, but we also have the responsibility of the creators of the contracts. And this responsibility actually involves, like, for example, doing security audits for the smart contracts. Is there anything in place that forces them to do this? Or how would I, as a user who is not tech savvy, actually know, okay, this is a secure contract?
You can see a lot of these audits, they're public. And so you can understand like what are the top auditors. So like an Open Zeppelin is a really great auditor. I think one of the best in the space. There's tons of different auditors, ConsenSys Diligence as another example. And so oftentimes they'll post those audits publicly. And so before you kind of invest in a protocol, you should make sure that protocol has made those public or at least confirmed that those audits have been done. If you see, Cotton Candy has just spun up on Binance Smart Chain and it's offering like 4,000% yield and it's a brand new team that you've never heard of, well, maybe that's not as safe as like a Uniswap or a Synthetics, who is like very well known in the crypto space. They kind of call them like blue chip DeFi. So really understand like how long has this team been operating? Are their audits public? Do they take a lot of responsibility for security? Is that a high priority for them? And you can find out all of that information online. And we work in public in the crypto space. All the code is open source. Everything is just out in the open, communities building together online. And so if you can't find something, go to the team's Discord or Telegram and say, hey, I'm looking for the audit report. Can you share that with me? And they'll have people there that are responding and getting you those answers. And if they don't, well, then maybe that's a red flag, and maybe, you know, a project you might want to steer away from if they don't have an active community online.
Those who don't know what audit is in the space, it really means audit of the code, because everything is automated through the code. And so you want to make sure that that code does not have bugs or things that other people can exploit and then just attack the project. So there is no mandatory auditing process for projects, but the industry coming together and, the serious projects have one or two, if not three, audits of their projects and continue to audit what they're doing as they're innovating. So it should be very clear from their website that they have conducted that audit and that they share the findings of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And another common misconception or misunderstanding is that there's no regulation in this space, and that's just not true. The regulation is in the code, and that's why it's so powerful. We don't need third parties to come and rent seek on this code because the regulation is there. It's embedded into the smart contract, and that's so powerful, but it's our responsibility as users of these protocols, as supporters and investors in these protocols, to make sure that that code is solid and that regulation is included in it. And so the audits are one of the ways that can tell you that.
I guess this is also like the dangerous beauty, let's call it, of these smart contracts, that everybody in the world could write their own contracts with their own rules, deploy it, and others could use and agree to follow these rules. And let's say one aspect that's interesting for me as a developer is the composability of these smart contracts. So I don't even need to invent something completely new, but I can just use them like Legos and put them together to create something new. And one challenge that I face here, of course, that I need to query maybe different data. And since we have the opportunity here with you, Tegan, could you maybe first explain us the challenge here, the problem, and also what kind of solution the blockchain space is offering?
Yeah, absolutely. So with the advent of the internet, which we're all very familiar with, there was a lot of great data there, but developers and users of the internet early days couldn't access that data, or even me as a user, I couldn't access that data in the traditional web without the advent of Google and their search functionality. The problem with the internet is that it's centralized, and so someone has to own that data. For example, Google, Facebook, Amazon, they all own that data. And so the incentive then is, it seems like we're using the internet and it's all free, but it's not free. We're paying with our data. And that's kind of not what the internet was created for. And so with the decentralized space, we're breaking that open. Within the graph specifically, the graph is indexing and querying the data in the blockchain space in what we call Web3, the decentralized internet, to allow for that removal of being able to monetize data, sell ads, because that's what the centralized internet is incentivized to do. It's incentivized. That's the only way that they can make money. And these companies like Google is worth $1.4 trillion. Why is Google worth $1.4 trillion? Because they're constantly selling us ads, they're selling our data, they're doing weird things that aren't really consensual with our information. And we want to change that. We want to revolutionize the way the internet's done. And so we're changing the incentive structure. We're making it so that so that the data is open and transparent for anyone to use, anyone to build with, anyone to benefit from. And that's really powerful. And I think I'm really excited for the future and what that looks like. And I think that in the future, people won't need to work for centralized companies that they aren't passionate about the mission of those companies. And instead, they can work for many different protocols. They can be a liquidity provider on Uniswap. They can be a delegator in the Graph ecosystem. And they can really kind of work towards ideas and work on protocols, as opposed to like working for a centralized company that isn't really paying them commensurate to the value that they're bringing, which I think is where 99% of the world sits right now. I come from traditional finance and investment banking, and as an analyst, you're working 100 hours a week and you're paid the least, where the managing directors are paid the most and they work the least. How does that make sense? And you have to build your way up for 5-10 years to get paid commensurate to the value you're bringing. Like, no, thank you. Let's change that system. Let's flip it on its head. And that's why I'm so passionate about the crypto space.
I'm just getting a few Telegram messages, super hyped actually from your overview you just gave. And one question that I'm getting here is, what should I read? I want to get into the space. Is there anything where I could get started? Anything that you would recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have a whole notepad with resources, and I'm redoing my website, and all of those will be posted there. But in the interim, if you message me on Twitter at the Kline Venture, I'm happy to share those resources with you. I think Laura Shin does a really great job. She has like a Blockchain 101 podcast, and I used to binge Laura Shin when I was getting into the space. I also really recommend going to different events. Like Bitcoin Miami is happening right now. It's the first event after COVID. Everyone's really excited. And this is really kind of in the crypto culture, is like going to different events, meeting one another and asking questions. And so when I was breaking into the crypto space, what I did is I would listen to I would go to conferences, I would listen to presentations, I would take notes, and anything that I found interesting, I would go up to the speaker and speak to them about it afterwards, or I would ask for their card and then schedule a one-on-one with them. And I think people in this industry are super approachable. Everyone is super willing and open to talk, and everyone's hiring right now. So come chat to us and break in, because there's so many opportunities, and we want to kind of welcome you with open arms.
In terms of the resources, I think Laura Shin's Unchained is a great podcast. There's also something called The Defiant. And those are really, Defiant is really DeFi focused. It goes very deep. And so you have all these podcasts, all these newsletters that you can, sign up to. And you have a lot of specialized publications like Cointelegraph, The Block, or CoinDesk, which really give you like day-to-day information about what's going on in the space. And everyone, as Tegan said, everyone is super open. If you ping people on Twitter, they'll answer. I would look at Twitter a lot if you're really deep in the space and you want to understand the different projects. Just follow them on Twitter, follow them on Telegram, follow them on Discord for more technical folks, where they, all the projects communicate their roadmap, what products they're issuing, how you access to them. There's tons of documentation and guidelines, and you can, interact directly with the teams on those channels. And that's quite unique. You would never have that with, all the legacy, banks and tech providers. It's really something that's unique in the space. And remember that we're very early in the space. Even though like people are waking up to it, like there's tons of opportunities to get involved. I'm hiring for all our portfolio companies. If you're, Web2 developer, or you want to get involved, just, same thing, ping me, and happy to see how we can transition you.
Yeah, and I can completely confirm this. Like the whole Web3 space is super approachable. Even like CEOs and people making billions in a month or in a year, like they answer you. Of course, if they need to find the time, but it's not like in the old world. I had, for example, a conference once, and there was the director of the Central Bank of Europe. And I tried to talk to him just to understand if he has any connection to blockchain, if he has anything heard about it. And he just completely ignored me. Like, I was in front of him and he really literally ignored me and didn't say nothing. And yeah, the Web3 space, that's one of the things that I really like there. Everybody, is approachable. And even if not, it does not matter too much because it's permissionless. So you can just fork the code and then build it yourself. So you don't need necessarily the contact. Of course, it's maybe an advantage to have some insights, but in the end, it's the code that is the law and the code that is speaking. And one question here that at blockchains that we always take care of is how we envision the future. And I don't mean necessarily a future that we project from the present, so something that is likely to happen, but more what is a desirable future? What kind of future do you want to enable through DeFi? Do you have here a vision that you're following?
Yeah, I mean, I think that innovation looks really weird until it changes everything. And I think that's kind of where we are with crypto. It's still looking a little bit weird, but it's starting to change everything. This is going to be the largest wealth transfer we see in our lifetimes, if it's not already. And I think that in the future, people will be able to work for ideas as opposed to just working for centralized corporations. I think that DeFi and other asset classes within crypto, for example, like NFTs, that's giving wealth to artists and creators that were previously left out of that financial system. A lot of people had to turn away from their creative side because they needed to go and make a living and feed their families and feed themselves. And that's not how it should be, right? People should be able to look at what they're passionate about and be able to find something within the world that they can make a living off of doing that, if not, beyond just a living. And I think DeFi is going to give people, and NFTs in the crypto space will give people the freedom, the financial freedom to quit working for the man, quit being a cog in someone else's machine, and be able to kind of empower themselves in a different way that wasn't previously possible. And I think that we're really going to reshape work and reshape the way everyone lives. I think that the crypto space will touch everyone's lives. And I think we're probably 1 or 2 years away from that, but it is coming. And so would love to kind of welcome people that were previously left out of the financial system. Credit cards are rampant. The rates on those are rampant. If, these banks make money off of the poor people in this ecosystem. Like, if you don't have money in your account, they charge you an overdraft fee. How does that make any sense at all? Meanwhile, the investment bankers are flying first class to go and move periods on a presentation to get it ready to sell one company to another. It's so ridiculous to me. And so I'm excited to really kind of reshape everyone's lives and empower each individual.
Yeah, I would term it as sort of liquid wealth creation across all the assets that allows you to interact digitally and globally with assets and people, right? So think about movements around the metaverse and how people are engaging in the gaming industry or in the digital world. And so I think in the future what we'll see is representation of ourselves in this digital world that has value, right? It's not just about gaming, it's about showing up in the world as who you are in the digital space. And I think that's a generational shift, of course, but I think also with COVID, everyone understood the value of digital, and the value of digital will exceed the value of physical and be tied in a way, but through the blockchain technology and through this capacity to own things in the digital world in a unique way, like NFTs or assets, and being able to monetize them and use the proceeds thereof. I think that's really the future we're looking at. And it's a future where, as Tegan said, people are empowered to contribute and are able to be rewarded for their contribution and not be, cut out by a middleman or have value taken away by a middleman.
I'm just getting here a message in the chat reacting to all of this. Hey, my name is Laura. It's super exciting to see actually two women in these key figures in the DeFi space. I did not expect this, especially if you look at the old finance world where you have this male dominance, and now suddenly we have a system in place where everybody can just do what they want to do. And the question here is there anything as a female that I could get connected to? Is there any movement that focuses on female investors, traders, developers?
There's so many different women in blockchain events, and Vanessa leads a lot of these, so she's a great resource. There's also Black Girls Code if you're kind of more on the technical side. She 256 is another great organization out of Stanford. They focus on kind of women within the crypto space. But I'll pass it over to you, Vanessa, because I know you probably have a ton of resources.
Yeah, I mean, historically, Women in Blockchain has been a sort of decentralized, organization all over the world. You have local chapters that you can connect to. But what the message that I want to say is like, this industry is so open and so different that, what you may have faced as a woman in terms of reaction when you get into the finance or the technology space is not something that you're going to experience in the crypto space, even though crypto and DeFi is a combination of tech and finance. It is really open. It's young. It doesn't have all the sort of biases that you see in the space. And everyone is judged on their contribution, whether you're a coder, whether you're a technologist, whether you're a marketer, whether you're a finance executive. Everyone has the chance to contribute, but also it's so early that, as we've said, the sector is hiring like crazy. And, the first thing you can do for yourself is show up. And then rely on women like us and other groups, to get you through and connect you to the right projects and opportunities.
Yeah, thank you for these wonderful warm words. And actually, there is also the opportunity to meet you. In December, we have the Blockchain's conference here in Hamburg, and you will also be one of our keynote speakers. So if anyone is interested in meeting Vanessa, please visit us. As she just stated, she's super approachable and happy to help. And I also want to thank you, Tegan, for these great insights into the graph and the overview of the DeFi space. Next week, we actually will talk more about the tech stack of the graph. So we will deep dive into this. And we have one of the developers here, and we'll do like an overview of how does the graph work, what kind of problems does it solve, and really understand what's the future there. I want to say once more, thank you very much, Vanessa. Thank you very much, Tegan, and everybody have a wonderful evening.
Thank you for having us. And thanks for the great conference you put together.
Thank you.